I wanted to talk about the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, when I first reverted to the path of the Ahlulbayt, for the first 1 or 2 years, I had only known about the 5 pillars prevalent in the Sunni school of thought. And those, of course, were Shahada, Salat, which is prayer, Zakat, charity, Swam, fasting, and Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. And for the longest time, I thought these were the 5 pillars of Islam until one day I was talking to my husband and I was like, I was talking like I knew what I was talking about. I was like, the 5 pillars of Islam are, these 5 things. And he's like, well, actually, the Shia school of thought has a different 5 principles, and no one had told me that, and I had never read that in all of my research, which I thought was really odd. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, although the common 5 pillars we hear are these 5 that are prevalent in the Sunni school of thought, the Shia also have 5 principles. So the 5 principles found in this Sunni school of thought, which are Shahada, faith, Salat, Zakat, fasting, and pilgrimage, these 5 principles are necessities to be a Muslim. So these are things that, when we call ourselves a Muslim, these are the 5 things we think about, of course. The Shia, on the other hand, have 5 principles known as Usul-ad-Din, serve more as a guide to be a follower of the Ahlulbayt alayhi salam and to strive along that path. So I wanted to get into these 5 principles because I think it's really important to know these 5 when you're thinking about converting or learning more about the religion, because they're really the pillars and the foundation of the Shia's ideology and school of thought. So the 5 principles for Shia Islam, Usul-ad-Din, are the following. So the first is monotheism, meaning that God is one and unique. The second is divine justice. So this is the concept of moral righteousness based on ethics, fairness, and equity, along with any punishment in the case of the breach of those ethics. Okay? The third principle that Shia Islam focuses on is prophethood. So Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam, for example. And this is the institution by which God sends prophets to guide mankind. So we believe that there are over 124,000 prophets, including Musa alayhi salam, Isa, Jesus alayhi salam, and Muhammad alayhi salam, of course, was the last prophet. Okay? The fourth pillar of the Shia school of thought is leadership, and this is really key as we go into further discussions about prophethood and imamat. So leadership is a divine institution, so not an elected institution, but divine, appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which succeeded the institution of prophethood. So after the final prophet, Muhammad alayhi salam, came this obviously the pillar of leadership, which is the appointment of imams, which are divinely appointed. So, like I said, not elected. And this is a really big difference between the Sunni and Shia schools of thought, is the concept of election, so an appointment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a difference of opinion, but in the Shia school of thought, leadership is the appointment of imams after the prophethood to continue the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his choice of a leader. Okay? And the final pillar of Shia Islam is Last Judgment, which is God's final assessment of humanity. So, of course, this is the day of resurrection, and other, religions, there is also this concept. So, these are the 5 for Shia Islam: monotheism, divine justice, prophethood, leadership, and Last Judgment. By the way, I'm getting a lot of these sources, if you will, from alislam.org. I'll put the link below. It is a really good tool for people learning more about Shia Islam, and it has a lot of Sunni and Shia sources within the text, so if you want to check that out. Now, I wanted to go a little bit further in depth on these 5 pillars because I think it's really important to understand them in a little bit more wholeness. So when it comes to monotheism, which is Tawheed, or the oneness of Allah, Tawheed is a concept that you will find throughout Islam. And if you go on to learn about the irfan of the religion, it's a really relevant concept. So it's the concept that Allah or God is the center of Muslim belief. So whereas other religions may focus on individuals, like certain religions might focus on Jesus, peace be upon him, Islam focuses solely on Allah. So although Muslims respect divine prophets, the prophets, including Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, are still only servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are not equal to him, they are just servants to him and here to convey his message on earth. The Quran also speaks about the oneness of Allah, so this monotheism. It says that Allah has borne witness that there is no God but him, and the angels and those with knowledge also witness this. He is always standing firm on justice. There is no God but him, the mighty and wise. And this is Surah 3, verse 18, if you are interested. And inshallah, I'll put that in the link as well. So, my experience on this pillar, so monotheism, Tawheed, having the oneness and the prophets being manifestations of Allah's greatness, is so reassuring because it means no one can be at the same level as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It means at the end of the day, there is no human being, no creation that looks like us that is equal to him. And that really was a big point for me when I was converting because I didn't understand how a human or God in a human form could have been equal to him. Like, for me, God, there was nothing like him. No, I say no one for language's sake, but there was nothing that could compare to him. And so that was one of the reasons that Islam appealed to me so much, and how making a partner with Allah, like putting something equal to him, was one of the biggest sins because it's just reinforcing that idea that there's no one like him. And so, yeah, we'll see how this, the concept of Tawheed, the oneness, is really prevalent in Islam, not just in the fact that Allah is one, but also in the way we execute ourselves in our day-to-day lives, making sure that when we focus on our prayers, for example, we are solely focusing on that one thing. When we are focusing on spending time with our families, we are focusing just on that one thing. We're not distracted by other things in this life. So that was one of the pillars that really resonated with me and is one of the first pillars of Shia Islam. So, the second pillar of Shia Islam is divine justice, and this is also known as Adl. So, anyone, by the way, excuse my Arabic, I am not originally an Arabic speaker, it might be terrible, I apologize. So, anyone who believes in the Islamic monotheism, so the oneness of Allah, also should believe in Allah's justice. So this is such a beautiful thing about Islam because Allah is just, He is merciful, and that is why every single time we begin our day, we begin our prayers, we begin anything, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah is the merciful and the just, right? So, because of this justice, Allah never wrongs His creatures. So this is really important. For injustice is an evil deed, while He is far from doing evil. And because Allah is omniscient, He does not neglect anything, and because He's self-sufficient, He doesn't cause wrong to others. And unlike human beings, He has no cause for injustice. And you'll see later on, when you learn a little bit more about the religion, this concept of injustice and how Allah doesn't do wrong, He doesn't cause injustice, because He is just. So that would negate concept of justice. Humans do it, and we in a way do injustice to others, and we do injustice to ourselves. And one of the reasons that the scholars say that Imam Mahdi alayhi salam is not yet here is because of all the injustice the followers of the Ahlulbayt are doing to each other, and how much there is in the world. So that's something we really have to work on, because Allah loves justice, and it's very important. And you'll see even in the narrations of Karbala, the stories of Karbala, how justice and doing the right thing and not oppressing others is a foundation for the akhlaq, the manners of the followers of Ahlulbayt. And that's one of the things that really drew me to Islam. So, and then in the Quran, there's quite a few verses that talk about justice, and this concept of how Allah doesn't wrong, we wrong ourselves. And it says in the Quran, and your Lord does not deal unjustly with anyone. And that's in Surah 18, verse 49, if you want to check it out. And there's many others, just an example. The reason I'm using Quran examples, by the way, is because you'll realize that Hadith al-Thaqalain, which is one of the most famous hadiths in Shia school of thought, Allah, the Prophet had said, I leave behind two weighty things. the Quran, and the Ahlulbayt. So it's really important when we talk about the Ahlulbayt to use the Quran as supplementary material. And when we talk about the Quran, we use examples from the Ahlulbayt. So I'm going to try to do that as much as I can, inshallah. So with this in mind, the justice of God is very visible in the fate and destiny of human beings and in their freedom of choice, because as we know, we have the choice to be just or unjust. And this is one of the things that drew me so close to Islam, because growing up, I was always torn between this understanding that don't worry, God understands, He'll forgive us, but there has to be some accountability for the actions of people. They can't just go freely after committing harm on others. So this idea is that there is accountability. There is logic and justice. There is, and that really resonated with me, that there has to be a day where we answer for all the injustice we commit towards others. When I say injustice, I mean it could be as much as, when somebody is in a room with you and they're talking badly about someone else backbiting, you don't stand up for that person and say it's wrong. Small things. It doesn't have to be the big things we think like murder or anything like adultery, these sorts of things. It can be the small things in our daily life where we cause injustice to other people. We'll get into that inshallah in another video. The third pillar, of course, is prophethood. So, in Islam, the prophets were the people who received the divine revelation from God. So Allah has sent numerous prophets and messengers to humankind since the dawn of history, okay? And these prophets were of two types according to sources. The first is local and the second is universal. So while the local prophets were sent with specific messages to specific groups of people, the universal prophets were sent with messages and books for all of humankind. And this is sort of why you see the evolution from Christianity to Islam, with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ being the final prophet, coming after Jesus, or Isa ﷺ. So according to sources, there were only 5 universal prophets, and their names were Noah ﷺ, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, and may peace be upon all of them. So this is another reason why I was drawn to this beautiful religion, is because historically and chronologically it made a lot of sense. And a lot of the prophets in Islam and Christianity, even Judaism, overlap. Okay, perfect. So the fourth pillar, I really hope you're not getting bored by now, but is succession to the Prophet Muhammad. So imamat. So the concept of imams. And you will see, if you've been to the masjid at any time, how essential the imams are to the school of Ahlulbayt. And they are really what differentiate us in this time from other schools, because all the prophets and messengers of God had successors. So after each Nabi, after each prophet, there was another one. And just as Allah appointed prophets and messengers for the guidance of mankind, He also appointed successors to the prophets and messengers as a matter of necessity. So Abraham, peace be upon him, was succeeded by 2 of his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, peace be upon them, while Moses was succeeded by his brother Aaron, or Harun, and Jesus was succeeded by 2 prophets who the Quran mentions in the chapter called Yasin. So likewise, like the succession in the prophets, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was succeeded by 12 distinguished successors, one after another. These successors were called imams and were appointed by Allah, not humankind. And this is a really big differentiation when you come to the difference in Sunni and Shia's thought, and in which you have to go back to what happened in history at the time of the Prophet's death in order to understand. Okay? So the right to ordain, imams belongs only to Allah. So only Allah can choose the imams. And the Quran speaks about this in many verses. For example, in Surah 2, verse 30, He says, "And I remember when your Lord said to the angels, 'Verily, I am going to place a successor,'" a Khalifa, basically. So this is, I'm not going to get into the Sunni school of thought, but the biggest thing with the Shia school of thought is that one of the unique characteristics of Prophet Muhammad and all the imams after him was that they were all infallible. So that is, they never committed any sin. And the easiest way to see this is to consider that all these people were the example sent for humanity, sent for you and I. So if they committed errors, if the people who we are supposed to follow committed errors, people would not be obliged to follow their errors, therefore making the prophets and messengers untrustable. So the reason Allah made the Imams and the Prophet infallible was so that we have the exemplary guide of how we should act, how we operate as Muslims. Like I said, Quran and Ahlulbayt. The Ahlulbayt are the living, walking, breathing manifestations of the Quran. And they are the best way we follow their manners, the way they used to interact with their communities, and how everything, the jurisprudential, religious, and spiritual aspects of the Imams. Okay? So infallibility is, like I said, really important because the prophets and messengers not only convey the divine scriptures of Allah, they also lead and guide humanity towards the right path, Al-mostabserin-The, right? So therefore they have to be role models and perfect examples for mankind. So it's really important to understand that the Imams and the Prophet were appointed divinely by Allah. It was Allah's choice, not the choice of the people at the time, not the choice of the fallible humans, Allah's choice. And that there were 12 of them, and they were all one after each other, until the final Imam, who we believe is living right now, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, and that they were sent to guide us and be our primary example because they were infallible. Okay? So, the final pillar, I'm getting to the end, I'm sorry, of Shia Islam is the Day of Judgment and the resurrection, Qiyamah in Arabic, okay? So, if you look at the Quran, there are over 1,200 verses that speak of life after death as well as the Day of Judgment. And there are a lot of sayings from the Prophet Muhammad and all his successors speaking about this day. So this is obviously a really significant event that we believe is going to happen after this life. That's life that is very temporary, transient, and that is the life that we are striving towards as followers of the Ahlulbayt, because we believe there is something more than this earth, than this life, which is filled with a lot of injustice and oppression. So we also believe that Allah placed human beings on the earth to test them, and different people live for different lengths of time before they die and their souls are separated from their bodies. And the souls live on, facing the grave and the questioning after that. So that's really what we believe, is that our souls will be judged. There also are traditions that talk about how both Jannah, heaven, and Jahannam, hell, have different levels, and depending on your deeds in this life, you will be judged according to them and assigned different levels, but I won't get into that because I don't have enough knowledge. That's just basically the basic understanding of that pillar, is that there is going to be a judgment day and we all are going to be held accountable for every single action, word, and deed we did in this life. So guys, that was the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about in this YouTube series, because I think it's really essential to understand the basics before we go into the depths of anything else. Islam is just as much jurisprudence as it is history, manners, and faith. So there's a lot to learn, but knowing these 5 pillars will really help lay the foundation for learning more about the religion. So inshallah this helped. Please comment below if you'd like to hear anything cleared, or anything wanted to be cleared up. You can also send me an email, and please forgive me if I said anything wrong or if I mispronounced anything. This is more of just something I wanted to do to get people interested and to learn a little bit more. Inshallah, I'll have a new video up very soon on a new topic, and until then, my duas are with you, and I hope you guys have a great day, week, month, however long it takes, inshallah.